My name's Kevin. I think I'm known to most people here. Pete was going to be preaching today. As you've heard, he's not well, and he does spend himself. This is the second time actually that Pete, in his kind of exhaustion, has been told by the doctors to lay down and rest. And he's contacted me and said, "Oh, could you please just fill in for me," which I'm delighted to do, and I'm even more delighted that Pete is getting some rest. Isn't that wonderful? He really he gives himself for us and to us, and it's really nice that we can give him a day off, let him rest. I recently, in the last 3 or 4 months, I suppose, I've spoken at a couple of funerals and I've attended several others. And so when I was considering what to speak about today, when Pete said, "Look, you can just preach on anything, doesn't matter," because you don't really have time to kind of prepare an expositional sermon, I thought, there's stuff that I've been saying recently that I really want to impart and share with everyone, because it's really important, I think, for us. Have you ever been to one of those funerals that's not religious and the civil celebrant stands up? I went to one, the civil celebrant stood up and he said, "Well, can't really be sure what happens when a person dies." And I confess, I was thinking, brother, why don't you just sit down and let someone who does know speak? I was asked to actually officiate a funeral a couple of weeks ago. It's a long story, never done that before. It kind of came about and I was delighted to do it. There were a lot of people in that group. They were struggling to come to terms with a young woman, 26-year-old, who had died, and a lot of people were not religious, and I didn't really know. Some might have been, some might not have been. And I was given the order of service, and one of the reflections that was on there, a little poem by author unknown, that says, "Those we love don't go away, they walk beside us every day, unseen, unheard, but always near, still loved, still missed, and very dear." And I thought to myself, yeah, that's what the Bible says. I wonder how many people realise that's what the Bible says. That brings us to the passage that Trevor read out from Hebrews 11. And it doesn't matter what translation you read, there's a particular twist in it that makes it difficult to see this in it. There's one particular word, one translation that I'll share with you, and it's in every one of the English translations I could find. It's exactly the same. Even though some of the other words get shuffled around and the sentences get reorganised a little bit. It's the last sentence that together with us, I can't remember the NIV one, the NRSV says that God has provided something better so that they, our ancestors, the ones who've passed before us, would not, apart from us, be made perfect. What does that mean? When you just read that in English, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. You've got to kind of scratch, what does this mean to be made perfect? Not apart from us, be made perfect. But when you read it in Greek, it actually makes a lot of sense. The Greek word that gets translated perfect is this word which has, in its various forms, the root word is teleos, which means the end, completion, fulfillment, something being filled up or final, a final form of something. So that when we say something, it's a theological word that is teleology, or the teleological view, which means the view from the end, kind of looking back. Steve Covey is an author in organizational psychology, I guess, and one of the 7 habits of highly effective people is that they begin with the end in mind. That's teleological, beginning with the end in mind. And I would suggest the Bible is written teleologically. But this word teleos gets translated as perfect. And the way to connect those ideas up, I think a very helpful way is to see, if you're drawing a circle and you get almost all the way around, it's not complete yet, but when you're finished, it's a perfect circle. Perfect. what the author of Hebrews is saying in this passage is, he's just been talking about heroes of faith, and that they were looking forward to things. They'd been promised things that they didn't get to see in their lifetime, but they were looking forward and they could see that what they were hoping for was going to be granted. And what God has arranged is that our completion as a people, as a faith community, as God's story of humanity, the completion will happen once, all at once. Everybody will reach that fulfillment all at the same time. Even though some have lived before and have passed, they will be made complete at the same time as we who are living today, or 2,000 years ago when the author of Hebrews was writing, he was saying, we will be made complete at the same time as Abraham and all of the others that were listed in the, and before that, Noah and so forth. He was talking about the resurrection. He was saying that there will be one moment at which time God will fulfill all of the promises and everything will be made, the circle will be perfect. The story will have reached its completion and fullness. It will be filled up and fully realised. And until that time, in the next verse, he talks about, so then, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. So the concept that we have, that we're being encouraged to see here, is that as our loved ones die biologically, they don't go away, they don't stop. Their story continues to be part of our story. They continue to consist in our community. In fact, they continue to be members of our community, alongside us, with us, as a great kind of throng that surrounds us and provides encouragement. Elisha prayed for his servant. Oh Lord, open his eyes so he can see. The hills are surrounded by, with the chariots and horsemen of Israel. There are more with us than there are with this little army that's come to attack our city, even though they look like many. I tell you what, if you only knew by faith that we're surrounded by this great cloud of witnesses, we are members of this enormous throng. And that throng consists of all of those who have gone before us in the faith, who have set examples and who now form our cheer squad, our audience. They share with us, in very real sense, they share with us our griefs and pains. They feel our pains and they share in our joys. And, I like to think that sometimes they're kind of going, oh, brother, and sometimes they're hopping out of the seat and the popcorn's flying, they go, come on, yes, you get that. Because they're connected to us. There's a doctrine, I guess, called the communion of the saints. And this is what it really means. King David is my brother. He's with me. He's sharing my experiences. So is Rahab, and so is Ruth and Esther and Noah and Abraham and Moses, and they're all with us. They're journeying along and they're being gathered up, and God is forming this great throng, this one story that's being filled up. And when it's filled, then God will make the story complete. He will raise all from the dead. Jesus talked about the resurrection. He said, that to God, everyone's alive. He was talking about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and so forth. He said that to God, they are alive. They're members of our community. They live on in our community because God has a purpose for them yet. In their flesh, they will see God. The grave will give up its dead, the sea will give up its dead, and every human who has ever lived will stand before the throne, and there will be a day of justice. Justice will be done. The stories will be told. The books will be opened, and the stories that are written in those books. Every day of our lives is written in those books. and our stories will be told. The things that have been kept secret won't be a secret anymore on that day. People go through their natural life sometimes with awful crimes that they've committed against other people, and they never get found out. They'll get found out on that day. And there are people living in this life who are a huge blessing and support and are giving and are spending themselves to support other people and to give into other people's lives, and who never really get recognised in this life. There'll be no secrets on that day. The story will be told. And every person who ever lived will hear the story. You know, we've got plenty of time on that day. Sun's not going down. Our stories will be told, and a judgment will be made by a good and fair and honest and just judge. So that when those who cannot and will not be a part of a proper, good, decent community have been removed from the equation, God can have his people. The dwelling of God will be with man, and he will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and he will be their God, and he'll wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there'll be no more death or fear or pain or mourning. And that's the day when everything is made complete. That's the truth there. That's the way life really is. God will have reconciled all things back to their proper order. So if that seems like an odd thing, an odd life where we all are completely open-hearted, honest with one another, forgiving and openly welcoming and loving one another, and that everyone has a seat at everyone else's heart, if that seems odd, that's only because we've been conditioned to see things differently. That's the truth. That day is our day. That's the day that defines what we do here on a Sunday morning. Because that community is, there's an expression, sure as hell. I like saying sure as heaven. It doesn't matter, make a difference. Both completely certain. And they're underwritten by the resurrection of Jesus. Because that's certain, we are taking from that day and living out the reality of it here. That's what we do. Otherwise, why? It's a bit odd, really, isn't it? On a Sunday morning to kind of come into a building and sing the same songs that people have been singing for hundreds of years, and pray some prayers that people have been telling stories that people have been telling for 2,000 years. And that's a bit weird if it doesn't, kind of have a purpose. Well, it does have a purpose. We are manifesting and making true in the present day the certainty of what God is doing in the future. And we can do that because God has granted that we, this community, is to be like a first fruit of the harvest. It's to be a taste. Life here is to be a foretaste of what ultimately will be. That's what we're doing. We're experiencing a taste of heaven as we gather together. I like talking about the resurrection, I often do, and I think that it's become so uncommon, I guess, for people to talk about the resurrection, the general kind of resurrection of the dead, that there are a lot of people kind of uncertain about what happens when we die, and kind of the going to heaven and all that kind of stuff. But I want to just express how important this was to the early Christian thinkers and preachers, including Paul. He had this to say about the resurrection of the dead. Now, if Christ is proclaimed as raised from the dead, how can some of you say there is no resurrection of the dead? So this was a question in his day. If some people were saying, no, there's not going to be, we're not going to come back to life again, it was a common idea in the Greek world that our soul will become disembodied, our body will die, and our soul will go off to be in paradise. That was a common idea in Greek thinking. And Paul's saying, no, there's a resurrection. And Christ is proclaimed as raised from the dead. So how can you say that there's no resurrection? If there's no resurrection of the dead, then Christ has not been raised. Makes sense? If Christ has not been raised, then our proclamation has been in vain, your faith is in vain, and we are found to be misrepresenting God. We, the apostles, are basically liars about the character of God if there's no resurrection of the dead. The resurrection of the dead, the understanding that that is what God is doing, is completely central to the whole kind of understanding of how Jesus fits into the story of the universe. It's the, if you like, the primary thing that his resurrection means. So I offer that as an encouragement that we do know what happens when a person dies. And it's a very beautiful thing indeed. And I can affirm that I think it was a humanist, probably, reflection that was on the back of this handout. Those we love don't go away, they walk beside us every day. Unseen, unheard, but always near, still loved, still missed, and very dear. And at the funeral a couple of weeks ago when I finished speaking, well, preaching really, and everybody appreciated it. Didn't have to be religious to, they didn't have to be religious people to kind of grasp what I'm saying and really appreciate it. But when I finished speaking, I turned around and the coffin was kind of near me here, and I spoke to the young lady and said, we're forced to give up your earthly remains, but we're not giving you up. We're keeping you, because we believe that you're a great gift to us from God, and we believe that God doesn't take back good gifts. So we're keeping you, Kim, and you can come along with us and stay for the ride and be there, because some of us, might want to speak to you from time to time. So keep your ears open. We can say that stuff. And we have a reason for saying it. It's not just wishful thinking. We have a reason for saying it. Because Jesus rose from the dead. So my encouragement to you is the next couple of verses. Since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter, completer of our faith, who, for the sake of the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God.